When you look at the sanctions that have been imposed in recent years on Russia, Ambassador Pickering, have they made a difference, do you think?
Not the seminal difference that those who wish to employ them believe they will make. But sanctions have been useful. They've been useful in Iran. I think they were useful in South Africa. They've been useful in other circumstances. But they need to be accompanied with a diplomatic strategy that's designed to exploit the sanctions to get somewhere. And that's often hard. The Congress seems to believe if they do sanctions, the answer will drop kind of from the heavens like ripe fruit into the lap of whoever is running the political show. And these sanctions have the traditional problems. One of those traditional problems is that the president needs to have some flexibility to operate the diplomatic answer that he wants to achieve with the sanctions. And most of that's been taken away from President Trump. The other issue here is a very important one we found much to our consternation during the Cold War, particularly after the Cuban Missile Crisis. U.S. and the Soviet Union, now Russia, have the nuclear power to destroy each other and perhaps most of the world. And not talking to them and not working with them, however odious the U.S. public and the Congress may consider them, and they certainly do now. The odious quotient for Russia is pretty high. The fact that we don't have the kind of contacts that are necessary to use and exploit the sanctions and the other pressures we're putting on the Russians is, in my view, a serious mistake. And you need to give something to get something, or you need to use pressure in order to secure some kind of return, after which you use that to build some improvement or at least some stability. And so it's important to look at this strategically as well as in the tactical phase of the moment.
You mentioned a diplomatic strategy here, and I wonder if you're beginning to see that come into focus here. Lo, these 6 years into this administration, do you think that the State Department, the diplomatic corps, has settled upon a strategy when it comes to Russia in particular?
Not yet. And I think that some of that is characterized by the vast difference between the president and his purported relationship with President Putin on the one hand, and this deep sense of antagonism and indeed almost anathematizing Russia that is felt in the public and the Congress, partly as a result of Crimea and the Ukraine, partly as a result of Russian policy, but Russians also unfortunately share some of that same feeling as a result of policy mistakes that they consider the U.S. is responsible for. Canceling the ABM treaty is one of those. The expansion of NATO is another. And we know a lot about the long history. If the long history continues to guide our work, we're going to look at further escalation and tit for tat between the two sides. And that gets us nowhere except closer to conflict. And in my own view, no one, and I know of in the United States, wants a conflict. And they ought to begin to think strategically about how to avoid that. And that's to empower diplomacy. And diplomacy has to begin to attack at least the Ukrainian question, but other issues that are out there between the U.S. and Russia.